Hey everybody, this is Seth.
And this is Becky.
Here's the deal. We are back in the lab retooling the podcast.
We're so excited to make all kinds of great new changes and relaunch in January with a brand new show.
We think you're really going to like it, but until then, we didn't want to leave you with nothing. So here's what we're going to do.
We're going to pull out of the archives some great interviews we've done in the past.
Here's one of those interviews.
Check. 1, 2, 3.
The Brief. This is the Brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's
arts and entertainment scene.
This is the
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the Debrief. I am your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler.
And I'm Becky Scarcello.
And this is another one of our in-depth interviews. This week we are talking to Rifino Valentine of Valentine Distilling Company in Ferndale. He is the president and founder, and they've got a lot of great spirits over there.
I'm sitting here at the table looking at them all, mouth-watering right now.
What do we got? We got vodka, we got gin, we got bourbon, we got rye whiskey.
Yep.
Rifino, thank you for joining us on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for bringing your bag of tricks.
Always have to have those samples.
Yeah. So I am relatively new to Detroit. I've only been in the area for about three and a half years. But I remember one of the very first things I saw when I arrived in town was the big logo that you've got on the side of the building there in Ferndale. That's Belle? Is that what you call it?
Her name is Belle, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And yes, I remember going to your place. So I think that this is one of the first places I ever went to in Detroit, but it's been around since 2007, right?
2007 was our official launch date. We actually were working on this company 3 or 4 years before that. So it's been a pretty good endeavor.
And it was groundbreaking here. Like, Seth, you don't understand. Like, me, so I'm in Huntington Woods, very close to Ferndale. It was like, what? What is this place? Like, it was so exciting. It was just something really new and fresh. And I mean, nobody knew that Valentine was a person's name. Like, it just, kind of just, yeah.
That's funny, yeah.
Super cool.
And that's because craft distilling was still, you're one of the leaders.
Definitely.
When we started this thing, there were a couple dozen across the country. Wow. And now there's close to 2,000.
So how did you even have the idea or the concept, or what happened there?
I mean, this started, at the very, very beginning, I was living in New York City. I worked there for a good decade. And it really came from what I felt was, as a country, I think we were kind of lacking in manufacturing. Or maybe should I say, that has changed in manufacturing. Because I look at this historically, where I grew up on a farm. We had a John Deere tractor. That thing, it was like a 1950 or 1960. Still running. We still used it. Back in the day, this country, especially the Midwest, cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, Pittsburgh, that's where we built the best stuff in the world.
Right.
And so in New York City, I worked on Wall Street. So I saw this stuff firsthand, where it kind of went from the quality of the products that we're building to the profits that we make as a company. And it just seemed like we were getting out of balance in that respect. And me as a consumer, I'm like, hey, what the heck? I'm kind of getting screwed here on quality. So when you want quality stuff. When I realized that the liquor industry is one of the biggest perpetrators of this. When you walk into a liquor store, not many people know this. You see thousands, hundreds of different brands. They're owned by probably 5 or 6 main companies. Doesn't say it on the label, doesn't say anything. Most of those companies are publicly traded too. So it's like, where is that money going? It's going to the shareholders. It's not going into the actual product. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I get that you had this ethos, but where did the liquor part of it come into that? How did you decide that I'm going to apply this to vodka?
To a happy thing, yeah.
That came from a couple different places, but mainly I was drinking dirty martinis at the time. And every swanky bar I would go into, I'd be like, give me your best dirty. Give me the best vodka with your dirty. And when I realized it was imported, mass-produced, these things that were perceived as the best
luxury items.
Yeah.
But they
and I'm paying extra for it.
Yeah.
So I want to know that the most went into that product. That's the short story. The longer story, I used to brew beer in college. So before the brewing thing really took off too. That was kind of, how I got my start. And it was like, we can apply these same techniques to spirits too.
And so you left New York and came to Detroit to do it?
Left New York. I was splitting time in Miami Beach, putting the business plan together. Actually, that's the guy from Miami Inc. Remember that TV show?
Sure.
That was on?
Yeah.
One of the guys on that show is who painted the original bell in watercolor.
Oh, wow.
So I was working actually on the business plan down there. He came up with the logo. We came up with the logo. And then moved here to do it. I'm originally from Michigan, and it just kind of fit. It was like, if you're doing this manufacturing thing, if you want to get back and show the country that we can still do this better than anyone, it's like, why not go to the place that kind of started it all?
Well, hindsight being 2020, 2007 was a rough year to start a company, and especially here in Detroit. I mean, what was that like?
Oh my God!
2008 got ugly.
Yeah, you got to remember. I mean, this would have really been 2005, 6, 7 before we got our first bottle on the shelf. It was a mess. Some of my investors were like, "Get Detroit off of that label."
Right.
And I'm like,
you don't want
no.
to be associated. Yeah.
I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's good. It's cool. It's going to be cool and whatever. So it all kind of came together, and I like the fact that it's kind of played a couple ways, because pre-2008, the recession, there was no such thing as the as a locavore. There wasn't the locavore movement. And
except at my mom's house.
Right.
Because we grew our own food in the garden. Yeah.
So it was just exactly. My family was the same way, in small pockets like that. So my business plan, we didn't have in there in one sentence, like, hey, we're going to sell this stuff because we make it locally. It's a big thing for me to kind of make this distinction, because we don't want to, it's icing on the cake that we make it locally, but don't buy it because I tell people, just don't buy it. If you want it, we're not a charity case here.
Right.
Like, we got some world recognized products. It's not a charity case. I really wanted, now that there is a locavore movement, I kind of tell people, hey, we're not a local distillery. We're actually a world recognized distillery that happens to be located where you live. And one of the reasons I like to make that distinction is, I mean, just picture, you're going to a nice party, you go into a liquor store, you want to buy something nice, you want to show up with a nice gift. And you're sitting there going, well, should I buy something local, support the local economy, or should I get Grey Goose, whatever. I want to take that friction that you're dealing with there. I want to get rid of that.
Right.
You can buy the best, and it's icing on the cake that it's made locally. So I think it's a big distinction for me. We grapple it all the time. It's awesome that the local movement has come about, for sure.
So just to, for guests who might not, or listeners who might not know, tell us about some of your awards.
I mean, the biggest one, our vodka won the world championship 2 years in a row out of London. I mean, so when I had this business plan, we had high, lofty goals. So we're going to have to make good stuff to sell it. But nowhere did I really think we could actually. Yeah, it's like the Olympics of spirits. So I still think about it, and it absolutely is amazing. That's the big one.
Yeah.
But our bourbons last year. Our bourbons won 2 of the biggest bourbon competitions. Bourbon, we're just talking about the U.S. now, so there is no worldwide bourbon. But we took the highest honors at 2 of the bourbon competitions.
That's amazing.
I know.
Yeah, it's fun.
So can I ask, and I know more about some spirits than I do with others. Let's talk about vodka for a moment. What are the things that people should be looking for when they look at a vodka and when they drink a vodka?
I mean, it's a great question. It's a lot like wine. Everybody knows wine and beer and stuff. You got your nose, your flavor, and finish. I mean, so you're looking at the same things, but liquor, and this goes back to why I started the company originally. What happens in liquor, I guess you see it happening in the wine industry nowadays too, where shortcuts are taken and cheats are made. So if you take vodka, for instance, the mass producers are putting additives in to fool your palate, to make your brain go, oh, this tastes smooth, or oh, this tastes good. To me, that's just a travesty. Like, that's everything that's wrong with manufacturing. So, you can add actually 2.5% by volume without putting anything on the label on a vodka.
Oh, so it could just be this mystery ingredient.
Yeah.
And if it's 2.5, it's fine.
And there's actually 2 mystery ingredients that they'll use, glycerol and limonene. But to me, it's like,
I don't know what those are, but I feel like that's something I
They
polish my
sound
floor
disgusting,
with.
and I don't want them in my vodka.
they're additives. I mean, it is what it is. But they tell your brain, oh, this tastes good, or this is smoother, and whatever. But so as you're tasting them, you really have to take it to the next level and be like, okay, am I tasting these additives or whatever?
Oh.
Some people are like, you know what? I don't care. If it tastes smooth, who cares? It's kind of like the guy in The Matrix where he's like, I know the steak is not real. Am I too old? Am I dating myself?
I remember it.
Does everybody remember that?
Fully on that, yeah.
I know the steak is not real, but it tastes good.
Right.
So, like, he
Yeah.
didn't care. I'm completely the opposite. Like, it better be real. It better be the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
As you start getting into liquor, spirits, you do have hangover effects and all these other things, even if you didn't care about the taste. But I kind of went off track there, didn't I?
No.
No, it's fascinating. Yeah.
But if I can't see it on the label, how do I, as a
How do I know?
consumer,
Yeah.
or how do I know?
You just buy Valentine. That's
Right,
it,
yeah,
only.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, that's why we exist as a company, because I felt that this just went too far. You guys have taken it too far. Walmart, you can do your thing. IKEA, I understand. When I buy my piece of furniture at IKEA, I'm not bagging on IKEA, but when I buy something there, I understand. It's not going to last 2 moves. This isn't something I'm going to pass down to my grandkids, right? We get it. But don't lie to me when, especially consumables.
Oh, yes.
Something I'm paying a little bit extra for at a nice restaurant, it's the same thing with the chef. I talk to, chef owners all the time of restaurants that we sell to. And, I don't want to eat at a place where the chef is just like, let's see what Gordon Food Service has for,
Right.
this week for their New York strips or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, these chefs are curating their food.
Yes.
You do the same thing with your bar. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
And I think the climate in Detroit has changed exponentially in that effect. People with the craft cocktails and really having good people in charge of their beverage programs. And that has to be rewarding for you to see kind of all the growth.
It's amazing because when we started, people were like, what?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
They're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just give me Tito's, give me, whatever. And it was...
How has that changed, and what are some of the factors that you think have contributed to that change?
I mean, I think people are more aware, just all around. People are more aware of where things come from and how things are made. I mean, look at our food supply now. Like, romaine lettuce, it's one of the healthiest things you can eat, right?
Yeah.
You can't even eat romaine because it's not
Tainted.
safe.
Yeah.
So people are becoming more aware. There's still a lot of education to do. People, these huge publicly traded companies have a lot of money to throw into marketing. So, it takes a bit to break through that. But I think we are definitely in Michigan, and now we're just taking that to other states.
When you say education, I mean, I assume a certain amount of that is educating the consumer, but you also must be working with, whether it's bartenders or beverage managers or things like that. Talk a little bit about how you interact with them.
Yeah, I mean, it starts, it really starts with distributors. When we started this whole operation, distributors were were like, what are you doing? You're making your own stuff. Like, you're not just a rep from some other company. So it started really with the distributor, and we were fortunate to have one of the two distributors in Michigan kind of get it really early on, Great Lakes Wine and Spirits. And then when we're dealing with, beverage managers and my favorite people, like I said before, are the chef-owned restaurants because they already get it. They understand. They're like, hey, listen, I talked to the farmer that grows my beef.
Right.
Raises the cattle,
So why wouldn't I talk to the guy that makes my vodka?
So they get it. Beverage directors are starting to get it now too. And it's even going to the next level where, so I spend a lot of time and years making fun of Walmart and whatever. Now Walmart carries us.
No.
So even Walmart is like, hey, I think we got to get some good products in here or whatever.
How do you balance that? I mean, you are
Yes.
expanding. Your footprint is getting bigger. How do you not become, one of the big guys that
you don't like.
Yeah.
Hey, I mean, people ask me that all the time. It's a good question, but I think there's a simple answer to it. And if you keep your philosophy of why you started the company in focus, is all you have to do. And the example that I always turn to is, I'm guessing here, probably 7 or 8 or maybe 9 years ago, Kettle One Vodka was a family-owned company from like the 1700s, 1800s. I mean, a long, long time. It was only until 7 or 8 years ago that they sold to one of the handful of companies that I'm talking about. Kettle One at that time was a massive company, and they were making it. They had pictures right on the back of the label of stills that looked just like ours.
Really?
So for hundreds and hundreds of years, they were doing it the way that we do it and the way that we'll continue to do it. Those little pictures of those stills disappeared after they got bought, but it's obviously not made that way anymore. But the point is you can still do this at scale if you do it right.
Okay.
The difference is I'd like to have a boat, but I don't need a 150-foot yacht with like 10 crew, right? Like, where do you need to take these things?
Where's your tipping point?
It's just like, and it's been done for centuries. That's what built our country. Henry Ford wasn't poor. That wasn't a small company, but they built things the right way.
Right.
Well, and isn't it satisfying as you expand that more people can enjoy your product and hear your story?
Yeah, I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Now, how hands-on are you? Are you still like tasting every batch, or how?
I'm in the factory. I mean, look, I'm not in the office.
Yeah, you have a lot of like bandages
Right,
and such.
yes, on your hands there.
These are working man's hands.
I'm in the factory every day. I have a great head distiller now, so he's doing all the distilling, but we still taste every single batch before we bottle it. If it's not good, we throw it out.
You have a relatively new still, right, that you named after your dog? Is that what I'm told?
Sherbert.
Yeah.
Sherbert, you're going to bring tears to my eyes. Sherbert, the real Sherbert, passed away just this summer.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm sorry to
He
hear
was
that.
the original 14 and a half years.
That's pretty good for a
Yeah,
dog.
he was doing really well. So in tribute, we named it's one of the biggest stills for a micro distiller, probably in the country. I mean, this thing is massive.
Oh. And what goes into a still? Like, what's it made out of?
I mean, it's a bunch of. I didn't make it, but I actually saw it being made. This comes from Italy. A lot of pounding and a lot of copper.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So it's literally hand pounded copper, custom shape for us. And the company that made it, they've been making stills for over 100 years. This is the first one that they've shipped to the U.S.
Ever?
Oh my gosh.
Ever.
I love the romance of all of this.
I know, right?
It's like a novel that I can't wait to keep reading.
Well, and we went to that company specifically. Obviously, they've got over 100 years of making stills for all over Europe, and we actually use the European style of distillation, especially for our whiskey, like triple pot distilled. So
How does it differ from the American style?
most American style, we invented some of the most efficient and inexpensive ways to distill. It actually came from the oil industry. We all know our history with the oil industry. Mm-hmm. Distilling oil or refining oil is really the same process as distilling spirits. So the American style really was based off of that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just different. It's faster and it's a little more economical. But that's a continuous still. We do a pot still, and we do that pot still 3 different times for each batch of whiskey. Same way Scotch whiskey is made and Irish whiskey is made.
Does that mean that there will be differences from batch to batch?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, for a small distiller like we are, there's always it's always one thing that we take the most care of, probably, is getting that consistency from batch to batch, because there is a lot of differences. Take our gin, for instance. I mean, we're sourcing botanicals all over the world. You can't expect every batch that comes in to be the same, juniper that you had the last batch.
So does it become like wine, where this year was
really great for
it
the
was
gin.
really great for this and that and the other thing?
Somewhat. There's not as much terroir or whatever I would say in spirits, but it definitely does play in, and we spend an inordinate amount of time focusing on consistency. So, for instance, everyone knows bourbon, how 75% of making a good bourbon is the blending. Every barrel's different, even if it came from the same batch. It just ages differently. The youngest one we sell is 4 years old. So over those 4 years, all the barrels just kind of go in their own direction. And one of the most important things is blending those. So blending to consistency, we actually blend our gins. We'll do many, many batches of gins and then blend them all together.
Oh, that makes sense.
To get that consistency.
Yeah. That's really cool. The Liberator gin is my favorite. I think it makes just a killer gin and tonic, which is one of my favorite drinks. And so tell us about what goes into something like that. It's got the different spices and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, those botanicals, there's actually the label says 9. There's really 10 botanicals in there.
Wow.
We get those from all over the world. And then we steep them for a couple days, distill them. I don't know. A lot goes into it, especially the barrel-aged gin. I think that's one of the most unique products that we make, the Liberator Old Town. A lot goes into it. Just, what was the question? Did I forget?
Yeah, just, you clearly don't want to give any secrets away.
Right, yes.
So we can move on.
Secret formula.
Yes.
We work on this stuff. We work for years and years. That's actually the gin. So when we launched in 2007, vodka was first. The bourbon obviously needed to age for several years. And then it took us several years to even get our gin basically on track where we wanted it. So that's why the gin came.
I think I toured your facility at that point when the gin was almost ready, because I remember we felt really special. They're like, do you want to try this? And they were saying cardamom and some of the chai type of spices.
Cardamom is a big one in there.
Yeah, and I remember we took a little sip of it. I'm like, oh, this is great.
So when you say it takes several years, what are you doing in those several years that you're experimenting with? What's happening?
Is it just sitting there? Or,
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a number of things. First of all, you're experimenting with just the botanicals. Like, which botanicals do we really want to do? Then you got to make sure that, whatever you're doing is going to be stable for a long period of time. A lot of people, since there 2,000 of these things have opened up in the last 10 years, that's a lot.
2,000
micro distilleries in the last 10 years. We work closely with Michigan State University, and that's where we did a lot of our test batches and recipe development. But a lot of people kind of rush into it and they don't realize that, hey, these things can change in the bottle even. If you're bottling a gin right after you distill it, that gin is going to be different as soon as you open that cork and then put it back on the shelf for another week. So you really want to make sure that flavors are what you want. The flavors are stable. You don't get a lot of oxidation and stuff like that.
So that's got to be amazing, because I can imagine putting two things side by side and tasting them and telling the difference. But I
Sure.
can't imagine tasting something now and then putting it in a bottle and tasting it a week from now and figuring out if it's different or if it's changed.
Especially if it's in a cocktail.
Yeah,
maybe not
somebody's
straight.
got to be really, really good to be able
Great
to-
palate, like super good taste
Oh,
buds.
my distiller, he's got the best palate in the world. He's like a super palate. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
He's the Superman
I've
of
learned a
tasters.
little bit, but he is a super palate of tasters.
Wow.
So let me ask about something that's not what's in the bottle, but the bottle itself, because you guys made a change to the bottle this year. And what actually goes into that process?
We've been thinking about that change for several years now, and it took us probably a good year and a half from the time that we decided to change it to getting the finished product out there. It's everything from design, and then you got to get it's custom glass, so you got to get custom molds made for the glass, and then getting it through the system. But it's exciting the new package is exciting. I think it kind of takes the company to the next level,
Yeah, it's
like where we
beautiful.
want to go.
Yeah, it looks nice. It really does.
It really does, yeah.
So,
That
wow.
perfect blend of legacy, I don't know. And I don't want to say old fashioned, but it just looks like a legacy, but somewhat modern.
Well, I'm glad that you say that, because we try to. Everything's a throwback for us.
Yeah.
Our manufacturing technique is a throwback. Centuries. This is the way they made this stuff centuries ago. And the whole theme of our company is, Detroit in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Mm-hmm. When it was actually called the Paris of the Midwest.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a throwback to that time, just that whole period. And that's actually our gin and whiskey bottle is modeled after the World War II infantryman flask.
Oh, I can
Their
see that. Yeah.
water flask.
Yeah. I feel like your tasting room, the bar feels that way too. It's like you go in and it's swanky and just warm and feels like history.
I like those things where you're like,
Yeah.
this could have been built 100 years ago,
Yeah.
or it could have been built like 10 years ago. Like, you don't know.
Yeah.
What has the reception been from the Detroit area? And again, how has that sort of changed and evolved in the...
I mean, that's probably the thing that's changed the most. When we first came up here to open this, the city of Detroit, we tried to open in the city of Detroit for years, probably 2 years. They were like, what is this you're trying to do?
The climate was much different.
Wow.
I mean, you have to realize, too, James was the first one to open in the city, and they came years later. What, 2011 or 13 or something, like years later.
Yeah. I mean, the city of Detroit was like, what are you doing? And I literally walked out of one of the meetings with the city and was like, they don't understand what I'm doing.
You were before your time, before they were
Called
ready
Ferndale.
for you. Yeah.
Ferndale was like, oh, we've heard of you. Royal Oak is going to be jealous. And the city planner had, like, that. I was on the phone, literally on the sidewalk outside of the meeting, and the city planner from Ferndale had me looking at buildings later that day. And ever since then, they've just been great. They've just been amazing.
I mean, Ferndale, it's fabulous.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Progressive. Yeah. So, what about any like celebrities that have encountered, and latched on to your products and stuff?
I wish I got Ryan Reynolds. He's got another craft gin.
Oh yeah.
Right?
We gotta hook him up with a Detroit celebrity.
I know.
Who would be Dax Shepard, Kristen Bell?
Yeah.
I was just talking about that with my wife probably 2 nights ago.
Okay.
I think they're dry.
Oh, might be. Yeah.
So that doesn't work out too well.
Let's see,
But they would be perfect.
Keegan Michael Key.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, we'll do some thinking. Jack White, obviously, something like that. There we go.
Right.
So, well, very cool. Well, look, we have a little game we like to play with people here. You want to play a game?
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah, yeah.
Here we go. We're going to ask you for a series of rapid fire recommendations. Just tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Starting with this, you said you started by brewing beer.
That's right.
Do you have a favorite Detroit area beer or beer that you really recommend to people?
Nick the brewer at Black Lotus. They're doing
Clausen.
amazing beers over there, and not just because some of them are done in our barrels. Nick the brewer at Black Lotus won like the gold cup out of some major beer.
I used to live across the street from there when I was in Clausen. Clausen, don't sleep on Clausen. There's a lot going on in Clausen right now. It's getting exciting.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that's my brewery.
What about favorite food or dish from Detroit that you might pair with one of your spirits?
Oh boy, I don't know about pairing, but Taqueria El Rey. I was just there.
Oh yeah, Southwest. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't tacos and gin, maybe the barrel aged gin.
Sounds
I don't know. But
Why not?
Obviously the game's getting elevated. Is there a bartender that is particularly good at mixology, maybe that we should be paying attention to, or even a couple in the city?
I mean, I hate to make this a shameless shout out. However, I'm going to.
We're all about that.
Yeah, we're okay with
actually.
that. Right, yes.
Well, I have to say...
Wait, as long as we get a free cocktail from them.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you will, because it's my own. And the only reason I'm saying Laura doesn't get enough credit because we're kind of a... we're not a mixology bar per se. We only serve our own spirits. And that kind of handcuffs her, to some degree.
Yeah, but you guys have all those infusions in the back.
Yeah,
the
got a bunch of infusions.
And the cucumbers
But Laura, I mean, she does an amazing job. I think she's one of the most underrated mixologists, definitely in the area. But of course, we have a nice relationship with Sugar House. They actually just picked a single barrel bourbon for just the Sugar House.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
So they got a whole barrel.
That seems to be a trend, too, where different distilleries are doing specialty just for restaurants.
But, see, now you put me on the spot because we have tons of accounts. The Ghost Bar at the Whitney.
Oh, yeah. I love
that's
that
a great place.
Yeah.
Actually, he won some sort of national mixology competition with our White Blossom vodka.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That's also
I forget
favorite. Yeah.
what the drink is called, but
Okay.
Witching Hour.
Oh, I've
Amazing.
had that one. It has like a layered look to it, I think, colors. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. I've had them all.
She has.
How about what's a wish you have for the future of Detroit?
I mean, I hope we can get back to, somewhat where we were. It is. I'm acting like I was there at the time, right? I'm old, but not that old.
You look great.
We just need to get back. And another thing about this manufacturing, here I'm going to ramble on about a little story here. We need to get diversified in manufacturing too. I mean, we can't be, oh my God, GM shut down 3 plants and the whole area is worried. The new corks on our new package, these actually are made by a company that makes knobs and plastic things for the big car companies, and he's trying to diversify.
Oh.
So we commissioned him to make these caps. Now he's one of the bigger suppliers for the craft distilling industry.
That's awesome.
For caps, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Tidbit.
I love that.
Is there a favorite Detroit charity that you guys work with?
We do a lot with the Chelani Family Foundation. We do a big event every year, the Cards and Cigars. That's our main one. We do a little bit with Belle Isle Conservancy.
Coabic Pottery. I know you did something
Yeah,
with them.
yeah.
What happens at Cars and Cigars?
You look at old cars,
Yes.
drink bourbon, and smoke cigars.
This sounds very manly. I
Yes,
like this.
very.
It's hair on my chest.
Oh. Okay, how about a favorite winter vacation spot? Maybe you go back home up north.
My wife and I definitely go. So Leelanau County, but I like it up there in the summertime.
That's where you're from.
Yeah. I grew up. Dad's still on the 250-acre farm. Up
Same
there.
farm,
Yep.
same tractor.
Yeah, the tractor actually is still there. Yes.
That's awesome. Well, Rifino Valentine of Valentine Distilling Company, thank you so much for stopping by. We love having you on the show. This was fantastic.
Yeah, and not just because you brought booze.
And not just, well, that's a good half of it.
Yeah,
No, but seriously,
It's a great story.
We love hearing the
Yeah.
story and about craft distilling and everything, bringing the art form here to Michigan.
And good luck for the expansion. I mean, we're rooting for you. You know that.
Hey, thanks. It's been fun. Thanks for having me here.
So people can go stop by in Ferndale anytime.
Yep.
It's the big building with Bell on the side. You can't miss it.
Vester.
Yep, it's the first thing I found when I got here. It's true.
It's a beacon. Yes.
So we'll check it out. Until then, Detroit's moving.
Keep up.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.